Intake conversations can be terrifying, from giving away too much free advice to clients ghosting you after the conversation to just being flustered all through the conversation. I know it can be really difficult to start feeling confident throughout those conversations. So today I'm going to teach you how you can actually feel confident and make the sale when you are running intake calls. Hello, and welcome to the Fast Forward Amy Show, the show where we lift your life and business with simple strategies. I'm Fast Forward Amy, your host and coach, and I'll bring you a new episode every Tuesday. I remember feeling physically ill when I met my clients for the first time. And I also remember my dad telling me, if you're a little bit nervous about meeting your clients, that's a good thing because it means you care. And although I love him for saying that, and to this day that's still true, I'm still nervous for really big calls. When I used to meet prospects or when I used to do phone calls with clients or people who wanted to become my clients, I was deadly nervous. I was almost peeing my pants because I was so nervous. And I know that many of my clients feel the same way, but not only do they feel really nervous about meeting people for the first time, they also feel weird about doing an intake call because over the years, intake calls and sales calls have gotten this weird connotation of actually being a free giving advice call, which is not what it's actually supposed to be. So today I'm going to walk you through some tips that you can implement right away to make sure that you can actually be the boss of your intake calls and that you can actually use those conversations or phone calls to turn your potential clients into actual paying clients. This is episode 94 of the Fast Forward Amy Show. We are nearing episode 100, so I must do something special for that. And that means that on our website, we are hosting an article for you with all of the tips of this episode. So if you are driving, calling, I don't know what you're doing, maybe I don't want to know what you're doing, you can just read the recap of all of the different tips on fastforwardamy.com/94. And my first tip of today is you gotta be the boss. And what do I mean by that? Well, when people are coming to you to talk to you about actually buying your service from you, packages, personal coaching, advice, consulting, I don't know what they're buying, but when they come to you, it actually means that they are currently facing a problem. For example, over the past year, I have hired countless coaches and consultants to help me in actually to actually teach me how to become a better leader, a better boss, how to look at scaling my business and all of those things. And I've spent over $100,000, I think, in the past year and a half on those coaches and consultants. And when I get to the point that I'm paying that amount of money for someone to teach me something, I'm feeling at a loss. It means that I really need some help. And no matter which amount your clients are paying you, be that 30 euros an hour, 50, 100, doesn't really matter. By the point people are actually actively asking for help, it means that they really need you to help them. So that means that in those conversations, you got to make it very apparent to them that you are the boss and that you're in control of the situation. Especially in times of crisis, like times we've been facing the past year and a half, it's become very apparent that a lot of people feel at a loss and that they need someone else to guide them in certain situations. So don't be mistaken. When people come to you for a conversation like an intake call, a sales call, they're not gonna come into that all confident and try to run the conversation. They're actually waiting for you to take charge and guide the conversation for them. So my first tip is you gotta be in control, take charge of the conversation, and you do that by being very confident and a bunch of other stuff that we're actually gonna look at right now. So first tip was you gotta be the boss, and that means that you gotta be in charge of the conversation. And the second tip is in order to do that, you got to know who you're talking to. So that means you got to be prepared. So what I like to do, I don't often do intake calls anymore or sales calls, but when I do them, or even when I just have conversations with my team, I like to be prepared by having them fill out a questionnaire. Or even with my dad, I have this. So I was talking to my dad earlier today and I texted him like, hey, later this week, can we chat about this thing that I don't really know how to handle? And he's like, yeah, could you answer a few questions for me before we do that? I was like, yeah, sure. And he texted me and he's like, okay, please send me an email with the answers to these three questions. And I think the questions were, let me think, what's the problem? What are the possible causes of this problem? And what are the possible solutions of this problem? And I love that he did that because it helps him be better prepared for that conversation and it helps me be in a solution-oriented mindset. And I was thinking, yeah, I gotta really implement more of that with my team. Now, with your prospects, potential clients, you don't have to ask those questions. But what you can do, for example, what I used to do when I used to coach people, for example, with personal training, was you can ask them, what's your current problem? What have you done in the past to remedy this problem? Which obstacles are you facing right now? When you can ask a few of those questions in advance, by the time you get to the actual conversation, you are like, you have a little bit of an armor with you because you already know which situation you're facing. You know, what do these people know? What do they not know? You're much better prepared, which is going to give you more confidence, because confidence literally means trust in yourself. And the more you know in certain situations, the more confident you're going to feel. That is going to show, which is going to lead to the first tip. The first tip, which was be the boss. The more confident you are, the easier it's going to be to actually be the boss in that conversation, which is what your clients are looking for, right? Because they need someone to help them. My third tip is that you need a script. And by needing a script or a sales script, I don't mean having this, like when you call someone to like, I don't know, what do you call that? Like a center, they call you to sell you stuff and it's all like very automated replies. I don't mean that. I mean that, for example, when I do a conversation like this, I always have a list of like 5 questions that I know to ask like in the same order of people. So basically, it means that when you are in the conversation, you don't just want it to be a conversation, right? You don't just want to be chatting to someone. No, that will be you going out to dinner with your best friend. That's just chatting. When you're talking to a potential client, you want to make sure that you're asking the right questions in order to actually make sure that you are a good fit to work together and that they're going to be buying from you. So for me, some of those questions are, for example, tell me a little bit about yourself. Now, in a business context, people are going to either start rambling or they'll be talking a lot about their personal life or their professional life. Just that first answer to that question for me gives me a lot of background into how these people are wired. A lot of words, few words, they talk fast, they talk slow, and I will start mirroring what they do in that instance. So that gives me a lot of information. But one of the other questions I ask, for example, is why do you want to work with me? Or why are you interested in potentially working with me? Then they will answer something like, oh, because you're very no bullshit, or because you love to drink wine, or because your favorite animal is a penguin. It's usually not that. It's usually not because my favorite animal is a penguin. Although they might say, well, I really like your way of teaching and you're really funny. So that means I now know that they appreciate humor, which is something I could use later on in that conversation. Now, when I say use, I don't mean use. You never want to be disingenuous. Is that the word that I need to use for this? I think it is. You want to be real. For me, integrity is one of my core values. Honesty is that as well. So I will never try to sell something to someone if I feel like there is not a click. I think that's kind of a baseline that we're not even addressing in this episode. Is obviously you got to make sure that you're there for the right reasons. And you also gotta tell them that. Which brings me to number 4, actually, here, is establish the goal of the conversation from the get-go. So before you start asking your baseline questions, which is the script that you have handy, the script for me is just a couple of questions. I just know when we get sidetracked, I go back to the questions. So to that other tip of establishing the goal, what I want to say there is I will usually just tell people like, hey, yeah, we're having this conversation because this is a big decision. For example, getting coached is really personal and I want to make sure that we're a good fit for each other. Not just me for you, but you for me as well. By establishing that goal, I also take some power back and I get into the seat of being the boss, which is what we want to do, because we want people to know that not only do they need to decide if they can work with me, but I also need to decide if I want to work with them. Now, I can do that because I'm in a position of enough authority, but you can do that either way. Like from the get-go, if you're good at what you do, I mean, make sure you're friendly, but also make sure that they know that it's supposed to be a mutual relationship. I've always told my clients, I'm going to be giving you a lot of energy. I expect that same energy and respect to come back. This is not a one-way street. So those are things that you can definitely already talk about from the get-go. I actually highly recommend that. I feel like it generates a lot of respect and mutual understanding, which is what you want to do, especially in a coaching relationship. Of course, you can use all of these tips for different types of conversations, even just talking to suppliers and stuff like that. Any type of partnership, working relationship, I think this works well for. Although it depends on like how much control you take. It will probably depend on the type of situation you're in. So you want to establish the goal, and then the fifth tip is probably one of the most important tips. Namely, you want to ask open-ended questions. So when my 7-year-old comes home from school and I ask, "Did you have fun?" He will tell me yes. Did you play outside? He will tell me yes. But if I ask him, what happened after lunch? Well, he probably just won't remember what happened after lunch, but I'm trying to come up with an example. So, for example, what I will do with my 7-year-old late at night is sometimes I'll ask him, what was the funnest thing you did today? Usually he can remember what was fun that day. So he'll tell me about that, and then I'll tell him, like, tell me what you liked about that. And he'll be like, oh, I liked when we went for a bike ride. And then he'll tell me, yeah, I liked it because then we saw my aunt and I had fun drinking a Coke or stuff like that. He'll start elaborating more and more. So what you want to do with your clients is you don't want to ask them, have you dieted before? Because it will be a yes or no question and then the conversation will die down. You want to ask them, which types of diets have you tried in the past? And then they will start elaborating on that. So you really want to focus on asking open-ended questions. And then, really important, that's the next tip, is you want to listen more than you are talking. So an example of this is, I don't do a lot of sales calls anymore, actual phone calls or Zoom calls, but I do sales through my DMs. So a lot of people will send me questions about my program through the DMs, or like, oh, I want to sign up, but I'm not certain this is right for me right now. And then I'll start asking them questions like, hey, I understand where you're coming from. Like, I feel where you're coming from. Can I ask you a few questions to see if I can help you? Oh, yeah, sure. And then I'll ask them, okay, would you mind telling me a little bit more about what you want to accomplish? They'll start telling me about that. I can ask them about the obstacles they're facing. I'm asking questions. And although it's a written format, not a spoken format, I am still listening more than I'm talking. The purpose of my pieces of text in that conversation are to recap what they were saying, to validate what they were saying, and to ask follow-up questions and to guide the conversation. The purpose for them is that they can really like throw it all out there, and I know if they could be a fit for the program or not, or which information I could give them. So be it in real life conversations or in emails, like I see this happening all the time. You send an inquiry to a company and they'll send you a huge ass email back with all kinds of information, and if you're anything like me, it goes like, boom, you're overwhelmed. And before you know it, 6 months later, you still have not replied to the email or taken any action, and you feel at a standstill. That's me with a lot of things in my personal life. When I need to take care of stuff and I get too much information, I just get overwhelmed. And not just me, most people are like that. So the trick is, when someone asks you a question, obviously you answer the question, but you also ask a question back. You want your potential clients' emails to be longer than your emails. In most of the cases, that is never true. People will send out a bunch of information in their emails and then not get a reply. So you want them to be talking and you to be listening and actually already serving them even before they've actually hired you. So with our upcoming actually the Business Freedom Elevator that we are launching right now, in 2 days we have our first call. We do our sales like this. We do some sales calls. I just don't do all of them. We have the sales DMs, we have emails, we have a chat box, and all of those, like the purpose of all of those different platforms is that we can listen to our potential clients and we can actually help them to make the right decision. And for that, we will see which information pieces they need, but we won't just be bombarding them with info. We want to be listening. So ask open-ended questions and listen more than you are talking are so important. I can't tell you the amount of times I've had someone pitch me something and I was like really craving attention and like, I just want you to listen to what I want. But they weren't giving me the space. So give your clients some space to actually express what they're looking for. And not everyone is as extroverted, so make sure you have the right questions prepared, which is one of the previous tips, so you can actually help them to open up. And you will see that everyone has something to say. Just gotta give them the opportunity to do so. Now, last but not least, I guess you will recognize this. So you've done a conversation that's fairly good. You feel like it went well, you were able to talk about what you have to offer, and then at the end, that moment comes when you need to actually state your offer and your price. If you do this the wrong way and you didn't use your own script, where at the end is pitching your offer, is how I teach it in my Business Freedom Elevator, but you've just been like all over the place, then pitching your offer is going to be awkward anyways. Like if you start pitching it in the beginning, you're already making mistakes about all of the other tips, because then you're already talking more than you're listening, you're not asking questions, so that's all wrong. So you want to pitch at the end of your conversation, and you don't want to be giving free advice in that conversation. You just want to be asking questions, because you've already stated it up front, like, hey, this is to see if we're going to be a great fit to work with each other. And at the end, when it comes down to it and you have enough information, you're like, okay, now I'll explain to you how I work. Thank you for all of this information. So the way I work is this and this. We accomplish that and that. And the way I do that is in my Business Freedom Elevator, and the price is 2,500 euros. Which questions do you have? Could be an example of how I would do that, only with less of a passive-aggressive voice like I just did it. I would do that with a smile, obviously, and I would just be like listening, then reiterating my offer and being like, it could help you in that way. This is what others have found. The way it works is 6 months of coaching and la la la, and the price is 2,500 euros, VAT excluded. Which questions do you have for me? So I'm not doubting the price. I'm not nervous about the price. I state it confidently, and then I just ask them, which questions do you have for me? Instead of then talking yourself out of the yes, which is what a lot of people do. They will get to a point where someone is interested, and the moment they almost have the yes, they will start talking themselves out of it when they should actually just be leaving. So, which questions do you have? And then someone will be like, oh yeah, can I get an invoice when I buy this? I'm like, yeah, sure. And you shut up. So the trick is to ask that question, which questions you have, or to state your offer, whatever, and then you are just silent and you just wait for them to do something, because that goes back to the beginning. You gotta be the boss. You gotta be confident. Potential clients are like dogs. They can smell the fear. If you are not certain about your offer, when someone pitches me something and they are not confident when they do it, I'm like, your price is too high. Something is not good. There must be a problem with your quality. And this reminds me, so 2 weeks ago, I went on a walk with my cousin and her kids, and the kids are 3, almost 4. My nephew, actually, he doesn't want to be 3 years old, so he's just saying that he's 4 years old. And he's very afraid of dogs. But we were walking in the woods, and there was this like dog place where the dogs can just run and do stuff with other dogs. I don't know what that's called. And my cousin was like, yeah, no, you can't go in there, because when you go in there, the dogs are really big and you're a little bit afraid of dogs. So dogs will smell your fear and they'll come after you. It was so funny to me, because he kept just like crying and he still wanted to be there with the dogs. In the end, he managed to go there with the dogs, and I think he ran away from them. I'm not sure. But the way my cousin said it, like the dogs will smell the fear, it's the same with you and your clients. So if you fuck up your intake conversations, you fuck up your sales calls, I'm sorry for my language, your clients will smell it, and you will project your insecurity on them, and that will become their insecurity about buying from you. So you gotta make sure that you really know how to start and end your conversation. It's the same with any type of pitch or conference. When you're hosting a seminar, you really gotta know the beginning and the end of your story, because those parts have to be very, very strong, okay? So my last tip was pitch your clear offer. It has to be really clear, and you gotta do it confidently. And I think if you're like, whoa, these tips can really help me out, this is about an intake conversation, but I would like to know even more about selling. Sales is one of the things I'm fairly good at. I can say it's how I've built up a business that does multiple millions a year, and a different business that does multiple 6 figures a year. So if you want to learn from me about sales, I've compiled this checklist with my 10 of my best sales tips. It's my selling checklist. And if you go to fastforwardamy.com/selling checklist, I'll teach you a little bit more about the do's and don'ts of sales. And I think just reading through those and applying those on a daily basis can really like triple your sales maybe. So go and have a look there. I've linked it up in this episode as well. And basically what I want to say is, I talked about the kids and the dogs just now, but I think sales, and especially when you're serving your clients, are a lot like actually raising kids. A lot of stuff in business is very aligned with how you can actually raise kids. So raising kids, growing your team, how to communicate with clients, all of that is based on respect, right? You want to create respect. But what you also want to create is boundaries, and you want to be firm. When you let your kids loose all the time, they won't be any happier for it. They also need some strict guidelines. And with your clients, it's the same. So don't be afraid to be a little bit firm. I'm not saying be mean. Also, you got to be good at what you do. But in those conversations, don't be afraid to take charge, because you are the expert here. You know how to plan the wedding. If you're a wedding planner, you know more about personal coaching. They're coming to you for help. So make sure that by being firm, you actually create a safe space where you can actually help them out, because that's what you were put on this earth to do. So don't, it's not just because you are insecure that you should be not allowing people to enjoy this gift that you have, is what I want to say. Show the world your gift. Make sure you can help people, okay? Yeah. Every Tuesday, I am back with a new episode of the Fast Forward Amy Show. Next week, I will be back for you with how you can actually create videos at a low cost and a high quality, and how you can use that for your video marketing. So you can always find me on Instagram as @FastForwardAmy, and this is the Fast Forward Amy Show, and every Tuesday I'm back with a new episode. Thank you so much for listening. I hope these tips will help you to run really great intake conversations, and talk to you next week.